Well, welcome. I want to thank everyone who's joining us on Boulder City Voices. I would like to welcome my guest, Judge Victor Miller. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I'll jump right in. So how long have you been the judge in Boulder City?
Well, there are three kinds of judges in Boulder City, and I am all three. There's a municipal court judge, a justice of the peace, and a juvenile hearings referee. Was appointed by the city council to be the municipal judge in 1984. So 34 years ago, I was appointed to be the municipal judge.
I was 1 year old.
And so it was a part-time position. And then in 1994, 10 years later, there was a vacancy for the Justice Court, and then I was appointed by the County Commission to fill the rest of the term of the judge who retired. And then after that, that's an elected position, and so and so that position's elected, and this is the fifth time I've run for that place. So I've been that judge for 24 years.
Well, when you became that judge, did they essentially abolish the municipal judge, or?
No, I continued to be the municipal judge, and so and now it's been part-time up until about 4 years ago. And so I had a law practice at the same time. So I was practicing law, being the judge out here in Boulder City, and it just got to be so busy as the Las Vegas Valley grew and we got close, it got closer to Boulder City. Unfortunately, a lot of the things that happened in Vegas have now slopped over into Boulder City. So it became to where it needed to become a full-time position. So also in around the year 2000, the family court judge who was in charge of juvenile court asked if I could take care of the juveniles from Boulder City, Searchlight, and Laughlin. And so I do that as well.
Have they rolled those three into one position? So if either you weren't to be elected or when you retire and they elect someone new, would they have separate municipal and justice of the peace, or would it all be one now?
It would be separate.
Oh, okay.
So because there's the elected, I'm appointed as municipal judge by the city commission or city council, and that would remain.
Oh,
and then
okay.
the election. So it's convenient. It's been historically that way, where the municipal judge and the justice of the peace is the same person. Clear back in the first time in 1967, Cliff Segerblum was both the municipal judge and the justice of the peace. Following him was Jack Quinn, who was both the justice of the peace and the municipal judge. And then Jack decided he didn't want to he had some dispute with the city council.
Oh,
and
okay.
So he resigned as municipal judge, and that's when I was appointed.
But he stayed.
But he stayed as justice of the peace.
Oh, okay.
And then 10 more years, and then he had enough fun with that one as well. So
that's interesting. So before you were appointed in Boulder City, you said you had your own law practice. I'm kind of starting and working our way back,
sure.
But when did you start your law practice?
Well, I started the law practice, I think, in probably 89 or 90. Before that, I was partner in a law firm.
Oh, okay.
And who did corporate law, and I wanted to do some things that were more involving people, helping people, rather than corporations, and we represented some large multinational corporations. And
was that here in Las Vegas?
In Las Vegas, yeah. The law firm was Edwards, Hunt, Hale, and Hanson. And,
okay.
Yeah.
And was that your first position out of school?
Well, no.
Out of law school?
After law school, I went to work for a district judge. I was a clerk for a district judge in Las Vegas, Judge Babcock. And that's where I got my taste for being a judge. And that's when I saw that being a judge, you can solve a lot of problems, or as an attorney, you create a lot of problems.
So when did you decide, hey, law is for me, I want to be a lawyer or judge?
I think it was probably when I was a senior in high school and took a government class. Jean Segerbloom was my teacher. I mentioned her husband, Cliff Segerbloom, was the judge here, but she taught government. She went on and was in the assembly here in Nevada, and also on the city council.
Oh, okay.
Just studying government, the branches of government, and the way it all works together just piqued my interest into law.
Oh, very nice. And did you go straight from bachelor's into law school, or was there a break at all?
No, I went right from I started, let me make a caveat, because I started in college in chemical engineering.
Oh, okay.
And my brother was a chemical engineer, or is a chemical engineer, and he got his PhD, and he's 10 years older than I am. And when he was graduated with his PhD, and I was a freshman in chemical engineering, he couldn't find a job. It was a recession, and the first thing that companies close down is their research and development when money's tight. And so he was having a difficult time getting a job, and so I at that point thought, well, you know,
I got to rethink this thing.
Rethink it. And really, what I like is government and law, and so I transferred my major to political science and went to law school. So
very nice.
now I will, for my brother, he did have a wonderful career as a chemical engineer, and with a couple of years while he got started, but ended up, with patents and, working with some important stuff in chemical engineering, primarily petroleum engineering.
And did you do both your undergrad and law school at the same university?
No, I went to my undergrad at BYU, and then I was recruited from there to go to the McGeorge School of Law at the University of Pacific. They came and advertised themselves as Nevada's law school. Nevada did not have a law school at that time, so I was in Sacramento, and several of the justices from the Nevada Supreme Court would go down there and teach.
Oh,
and so
neat.
So we had a Nevada slant, and so they convinced me with this Nevada's law school. Because I always wanted to come back to Nevada.
Yeah, and you were raised in Boulder City, right? Graduated here, and I know you have it on your sign. I can't remember what year it was.
So I moved here when I was 8 years old.
Okay.
Or not 8, 8 months old.
Oh.
So this is all I remember. And on 601 Avenue H is where we lived. And so then I went to Boulder City Elementary School, which was at City Hall.
Oh, that's right.
And our principal was Andrew J. Mitchell.
Oh, really?
Yes. And now the elementary school is Andrew J. Mitchell Elementary. And
so do you remember him as a principal? Do you remember interacting with him?
Yeah, he was a couple of stories. One is, if a teacher was, absent, he came and taught.
Oh, okay.
He was the substitute teacher. He had and one story I remember is, it snowed here, and you know how rare it snows in Boulder City, and of course, all the kids, all we could do was think about the snow, and we're looking out the window and seeing the snow, and finally he came around and said, okay, you can go out and play, we'll just let you go out and play, we'll have a snow day, but one thing I have to tell you is in the windows, because each classroom had a wall of windows, he said, each pane of these windows costs $5. I want you to remember that.
Well, very nice.
And then an interesting thing is, when I became judge, the courtroom was in City Hall, downstairs where finance is now, which was my 3rd grade classroom.
Very nice. So when was, if you don't mind me asking, what year did you actually come here?
It was 54.
All right, just so those who are aware, we've had a bit of technical difficulty, so we had to stop and start, but hopefully it's not too disjointed. So you were telling us a little bit about the historical, what was it like in Boulder City when you were growing up?
All right. So I grew up on the corner of Avenue H and Wyoming Street, and the town was maybe like the center of town. There was nothing on the lakeside. When you got to the Bureau of Reclamation building, you could look over at the lake, and there was nothing down there, houses wise. The south end of town was the high school, which was the junior senior high school at the time, and then what is now Broadbent Park had the pool in it, tennis courts, and the east end of town would have been Avenue M, and the west side, well, you go down to, when I say on the lake side, there was Lakeview, and or back then we referred to as McKeeversville.
Oh, okay.
Because that was one of the rag towns when the town began, and so that was pretty much the town. There's probably about 30.
Were people were living in McKeeversville?
They were living in McKeeversville, but by then they had actually built houses.
Oh, okay. So it was the same location, but
right.
It wasn't I know they had kind of makeshift houses, but they had really built homes by that point.
And the homes are still there. You can go down and see. They're homes that were built a lot with whatever they had available at the time. So there's some block homes, there's some wood frame homes, some so they're all different homes down there because they built with what was available at the time.
Very nice.
So I had buddies who lived down in McKeeversville, and when they came to school, we went home for lunch at the elementary school, but they had to bring a lunch because it was too far for them to walk home during the half hour we had for lunch.
Oh, okay.
So the elementary school was at the City Hall and the rec center, where I had kindergarten in the rec center in 4th grade. And then we had what we call now the old gym. The new gym was a playground.
Gotcha.
And then the elementary school was the City Hall.
And something you had mentioned that
may or
may not be what's left of the video. So your principal was Andrew J. Mitchell, and you talked about some of his stories, but you mentioned when they moved to their current school, which was in
94, I think.
Okay, 74, right?
74. Yeah.
And tell what they did. That was interesting.
Well, he had all the kids bring their wagons, their little red wagons. They packed up their desks in the books from the school in the school library, and then he brought his horse, and everyone pulled their wagons down to the new elementary school, following him on his horse.
And it's the one that Andrew J. Mitchell, right? So yep. King wasn't there.
King wasn't there. It was and it was called Boulder City Elementary School, and named Andrew J. Mitchell soon after he retired, I believe.
Okay. And you also mentioned that you had a junior high teacher that became rather famous.
Sure. My English teacher in 7th grade was Madeline Garrett, who they now have named the middle school after. Her and her husband, Elton, he was he was a realtor here, but I know he taught school before I got involved in the schools. But he was a realtor. We rented the house on Avenue H, and one of my jobs as a child was to take the rent check up to him.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So, what brought you here? Obviously, when you came, it was very small. You said between 3,000 and 4,000 people. What brought your family to Boulder City?
Well, my dad, he was working up in Twilla, Utah at the Army depot up there, and he got an offer to come down and work at Titanium Metals in Henderson. So he came down to work there, and then the family, within a few weeks, followed him down here. So he had a job over there, and he went from work there to American Potash, which is in that same group of factories there in
I know
Henderson.
Time Met is still there. Is the
Yeah.
potash plant still there?
No, they're Kerr-McGee, I believe, is
Okay.
Kerr-McGee took them over, and I'm not sure if Kerr-McGee's still there or somebody bought Kerr-McGee.
Gotcha.
They made rocket fuel, and so it's been kind of a lot of rocket fuel been made over in that area. They were making it as boron perchlorate, which people really don't care about that, but
I'm sure some people do.
he left there and went to work out at the test site.
Oh, okay. So he'd commute up to the test site up north.
Yeah.
Very nice. So you said you always wanted to get back to Nevada, even when you were part of what drew you to the California school was the idea that it was Nevada's law school.
Right.
Was it always Boulder City that you wanted to get back to, or just
No,
felt like Nevada?
it was Boulder City. This was home. This is where I wanted to come back. I knew that this is a good place to raise a family. The parents are involved in the schools, so we have good schools. It draws good teachers here because of that parental involvement. So it was the town that I wanted to come back to, not
necessarily just Nevada, but you wanted to be here in Boulder City.
Right.
And growing up, what were some of your favorite Boulder City activities? What did you do as kids in Boulder City? You know, it's a small town.
It's a small town, and so you played a lot in the desert. You chased lizards, and you took your BB gun out and shot BBs, and so a lot of that. You did slot cars, and that was a big thing, slot cars.
So what is a slot car?
A slot car.
I know people are going to say, I can't believe he doesn't know what a slot car is, but I don't know what a slot car is.
Okay. Well, there's a track, and it has a slot in it, and the little model cars, HO size cars, were the ones we used, and they have a pin that goes down in that slot.
Oh,
and then there's electric, and then you have a controller to control the speed. So you would race your buddies.
I think I saw a few of those when I was real young. I don't see much of them around anymore.
Yeah, no. What else would we would skateboards. We built skateboards because the skates in those days were you had a key, you put them on. And, well, you take the skates and you nail them onto a board, the front and the back, and then you'd cut it out to the shape of a surfboard or a skateboard, and then you'd do that, ride skateboards with metal wheels, and you go up to the park, government park up the top of town, and there's a big two long sidewalks, and you'd go and ride down there and go back and ride. Yeah. So those are some of the activities that we do. When I turned 14 back then, you could get a license to drive a motorcycle, a small motorcycle, and so we got motorcycles. You got a license, nice. And then you had to have a paper route so you could pay for the motorcycle.
Now, how many paper routes could there be in Boulder City?
Well, mine was from Avenue I to F Street, between Wyoming Street and 5th Street.
5th Street, okay. Very nice.
And you had to go, there were two newspapers in southern Nevada then. There was the Review-Journal and the Las Vegas Sun. Sun was in the morning, Review-Journal was in the afternoon. I delivered for the Sun. And you had to, you're a businessman. You had to go collect the money. You had to go out and solicit new customers. It was
the whole
deal. Yeah.
So, kind of a side tangent on newspapers. Do you know when we got our own newspaper, when they started the Boulder City Review?
Yeah, it's been here ever since I've been here.
Really?
It was that back then called the Boulder City News.
Okay. Was it connected to the Review-Journal back then? Or?
Back then it was independent.
Oh, okay.
And so
weekly, or
it was weekly, and then eventually it was purchased by the Sun. The Greenspun family had it.
Oh, okay.
And so they had that in the Henderson Home News. And the editor that had the Boulder City paper also had the Henderson Home News. I think one was on Tuesday, one was on Thursday. Or
Oh, okay.
something like that. But so then it was and then they closed the Boulder City News, and then the Review Journal came in with the Boulder City Review.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Very interesting. So as you came back to Boulder City, has there ever been a time that you thought, I think I've been here enough? Maybe it's time for me to try something new? Or have you just loved Boulder City since you got back?
I've loved Boulder City since I've got back. It's, and I was,
Raised all your kids here, right?
Raised all my kids here. We still have 3 at home. So, Josh is 13 and he's in 8th grade. And so, the roots and tentacles go deep here, and it's important to stay and get him raised and through school and be involved in, he's playing baseball right now, so it's important to be involved in Little League and involved in the schools and with homework and all the other things that go with having kids. So it's important to have the connection with the city, and I've never had a desire not to have that.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you a little bit about, I've read a little bit about drug court.
Mm-hmm.
When did drug court start? How did it start? Tell me some of the history
Sure.
in Boulder City.
Well, one of the things, drug court started in the early 90s. The 3rd drug court in the country was right here in Las Vegas. Judge Jack Lehman came and started it. It started originally in Florida.
Okay.
And he got the idea from there and brought it into
And about
here.
when was that?
That would have been like 1990.
Okay.
So I've known about drug courts for a long time. It's been frustrating as a judge to deal with people that I see and know have substance issues and not being able to deal with them. I would see people with substance issues that would be arrested. They would come in, they'd suffer their consequence, typically go to jail. They would get out, they would go back and do whatever brought them in the first place. So it's kind of a revolving door. But what they needed, as I saw through the drug court, is primarily they need treatment. They need counseling. That's expensive. And so I didn't have that resource here in town. Well, I got contacted by the Sunrise Rotary, just, in a passing discussion. They said, well, we have people who have, substance abuse in their families, and we have some money, and I wonder, is there anything that could be done here in Boulder City? And I said, there is. I know what can be done. And so, because we can have this program where we can take people who have substance issues and we can deal with them if we have the resources to do that. And so they gave us some seed money to get the program started, to where we lined up counselors here in Boulder City, a psychologist here in Boulder City. We lined up some people to help us with employment, and then we just jumped in. I started the drug court, became a member of.
And what year was that here in Boulder City?
That was in 2014.
Okay.
So we've been doing it 4 years now. And so there's a bit of a learning curve as you get started to know what works and what doesn't work with the addicts and
right.
the drug abusers. And so then I became a member of the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. I've been to their training annually they have training for the whole country, and I go to that training. The last one was in Washington, D.C., where there were right now there are 3,000 drug courts in the country.
Oh wow!
And 7,000 people going for the training.
Oh okay.
And so
probably a lot more needed, I'm sure.
Yeah. And so what has happened is, since 1990 with Judge Lehman, they have studied it scientifically. And so what they were doing by the seat of the pants back in 1990 is now developed into a scientific process. And so they have what they call best practices. These are the things that you have to have, and if you do these things, they're going to work. So you have to have a team of professionals working on it. So we've put together a team. You have to have random drug testing. So we've set up random drug testing. So, and then there's ways, that not only do you work somebody out of, get them clean, because, we can just, well, frankly, I can put somebody in jail for 3 months and they come out clean.
Right.
But you have to give them the skills and that they need to remain that way. So they have to learn how to be employed. Some of these folks, they don't even, they
haven't worked in a
long time. So getting up in the morning and going to a job is a feat for them.
Yeah.
And and one of the key things we do in drug court is we encourage them with positive reinforcements. So when they do things like every month, if they've gone to counseling, they've gone to their meetings, they've had negative drug tests, if they've done their community service or they've done their work, that they've done a series of things, then they, in our drug court, they get to draw a prize.
Oh, okay.
It's just like,
I didn't know that.
No. And
what are some of the prizes in drug court?
Well, they could be a gas card,
okay.
$15 gas card, or they could be a gift card to Albertsons or to Starbucks or to Subway, or they could be a haircut.
Oh, okay.
They could be a pair of socks. Some are good and some are not as
good. What's wrong with a pair of socks?
Nothing's wrong with a pair. They're all positive things, but you'd probably rather get a $15 gas card than a pair of socks, but or a lunchbox. But it's fun.
Yeah.
And it's positive. Yeah, but there are also we call them therapeutic consequences if they don't abide, if they don't go to their counseling, they have a dirty drug test, then there have to be sanctions, and we try to set those up to be therapeutic, so that they will learn a lesson, they will want to not repeat it, but at the same time know that, hey, because you've messed up, life's not over. It's like, okay, we've got a bump in the road. Let's work with it. Let's go on from here.
So how, being as unbiased as you can, how successful do you feel drug court has been here in Boulder City?
It's been amazing. We've changed lives. We've had 10 people graduate. We have another one graduating on the 2nd of October.
Oh, great.
And
so what does it take to graduate? How long do you have to be clean?
Okay, so you have to be clean for 365 days.
Okay.
You have to have a job. You have to have a bank account. You have to have a GED.
Oh, wow.
You have to have, because that's one of the things we do.
As part of the job training.
Yeah. You have to have a driver's license, an active Nevada driver's license. You have to work with our social worker to have a budget and live according to the budget.
Wow.
We work with the one-stop career center at the library to try and get people careers rather than jobs.
Okay.
And so they provide training. They've trained people to be medical assistants. They've trained people to be heating and air conditioning technicians.
Oh yeah. Which is
so
very important out here.
Very important. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and we encourage and get them. We have a young man who's right now working on getting into the electrical union. He wants to do the apprenticeship there. So
very nice.
Yeah.
So, like you said, we've had 10 graduates, about to have another one. Is it still being funded through the Rotary, or is the city funded a lot of it now? Or?
Well, The state legislature gave some money to the administrative office of the courts
Okay.
for specialty courts, and so we've put in a grant request with them, and so we're being granted money from them and from the city, and then the Rotary now is more of a matching.
Okay, so they're still providing some of the funds.
They're still providing and helping. Primarily what we use their money for is the incentives. So,
oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Very good. So do you think, if there were more funding, would drug court be expanded, or could it be expanded, or is it meeting the need here in Boulder City?
It could be expanded. I see as I get people through my court that there are other people that could, but you know, about 18, 19 is what we can function with without having more staff.
Okay.
And things. So.
And is it, you just have to make a call as the judge whether someone who's coming in for other offenses, it's time to transition them into drug court? Or how does that work? When I show up before you and you know I have a substance issue, how do I get into drug court, so to speak?
Well, it's a voluntary process.
Okay.
You know, you can take the choice and go to jail, or you can take the choice to go through the drug court program.
So voluntary, but it sounds like a pretty good alternative.
It is, but there's some salesmanship that has to go in with this, because it's hard to become a substance-free, productive citizen is hard work, and it takes a while. It takes, you know, up to 18 months, 2 years sometimes to get through it. So. And there's a lot of things you have to do. You have to go to, you know, individual counseling every week. You have to go to group counseling every week. You have to go to a 12-step meeting, AA or NA meetings at least a couple times, starting out with maybe as many as 90 meetings in 90 days to you know, cement in some of the habits. You start off on house arrest, so you have a bracelet, a GPS bracelet, so you're either home or at work or at meetings or
Gotcha.
at counseling. So these are hard things, you know, and then that, you know, just doing all these things is hard, but the stress, the beginning of the program, just the stress of coming off from the addiction is just tremendous. And someone would just say, I'd just rather go to jail than to go through this.
Oh,
and then I have to explain that, okay, you can go to jail, you can go sit, you know, in jail for 6 months. I'll give you 6 months in jail, because that's what we can give people for misdemeanors. You get out with good time in 4 months. 4 months later, you're the same person with no new skills and with the same mindset, making the same decisions that brought you in here today.
Right.
So we're giving you a gift, is probably $30,000 worth of training and counseling and an opportunity to be the person you imagined you wanted to be when you were in 5th grade.
Oh, I like that. So, and I guess one of the things that I've had opportunity, obviously, to interact, I think we all have, with those who struggle with addiction. And one of the things that's always been hard for me is, what does the person do? Say they're listening to this and they say, you know what, that sounds great. That would be perfect for me. But I'm not in front of a judge. I'm not a criminal right now. I hope not to become one. But I need to turn my life around. And I know I'm putting you on the spot with this one. I don't know if such a program exists. But as I've met with people who struggle with addiction, it seems like there needs to be a drug court for those who haven't yet committed a crime.
I agree. Because, you know, I will get a call or run into somebody at the supermarket and say, how do I get my kid into drug court? How do I get my spouse into drug court? And without there being a criminal offense, you can't. And so there are programs out there. One of the things with Obamacare was substance abuse counseling is included in every insurance up to 30 days. But the problem is, I dealt with a young man who just came into our drug court, and told him that, because of his substance and the years of substance, I think he needs to start with a 90-day inpatient program. We have a partner, West Care, who runs the Harris Springs up in up on Mount Charleston, and they have a spot for him. And and he said, I've already done that. I did that 4 years ago. And I said, well, the difference is when you came out into your same old surroundings, and you didn't have the support that you'll have now. When you go there, you'll come back here, and you're still going to be drug tested, randomly twice a week. You're still going to come and meet with the social worker. You're still going to go to counseling. So all of the support you have after you get out of there is what will make the tools that you've learned at Harris Springs effective in your life.
Yeah.
But that's the problem. Somebody can go to Seven Hills and go through their program, right, and come out clean with some good things. So if they don't have they need to change their friends. I have on my bench a little slogan that I picked up, and it's an interesting story, but I won't go into where this came from. But it says, "Show me your friends, I'll show you your future." So you've got to change who you got to change, as we say, you got to change your playmates, your playground, and your playthings. And so you got to change, those the negative influences in your life. You got to change the negative places in your life, and you got to get away from the drugs.
Yeah.
So, and that's the problem. If you go there to one of these inpatient programs, you get clean, you need to come out in a way that is going to make it effective. I know people that have been successful. I talked with a young man who had problems in our court 3 years ago, and now he wants to clean that mess up. He's back in Illinois, and he told me, "Judge, I was a mess. I had to get away from Boulder City, and so I'm back here. I go to meetings, I'm clean, but now the mess back in Boulder City, I need to clean up what I left behind." So I said, "Okay, we'll work with you. Here's what you have to do." I pulled out, and he thought he had some felony warrants, but turns out all he does, he owes us $500. So I said, "Hey, you pay the $500, we'll quash the warrant, you can get your driver's license." And he said, "Oh, you take a credit card."
He was ready to move on. That's great.
Yep.
Great. Well, I also want to ask you a second thing, something that goes along with substance abuse. Often they're tied together, and that is homelessness. Mm-hmm. I think we've dealt with homelessness different ways in Boulder City. I think it's even changed since I've been here. And it's a tough answer, right? What to do. And so I guess my first question is how is it viewed from your position as a judge in Boulder City? Obviously, I guess being homeless isn't illegal, but sleeping on the streets is, right? You can't just sleep. I can't go to Avenue H and Wyoming, pitch a tent, and
you cannot, as they get charged with camping without a permit.
Okay.
You can't camp without a permit. And you can't be in the parks between 11 o'clock at night and 6 in the morning. So that's where I see the homeless. They get cited for sleeping in the park, being in the park after hours, or camping without a permit. And that's typically where I see them. There is a connection with the drug court, because many of the people that we have in the drug court, when we got them, were homeless.
Okay.
So
were some of them brought to you for those issues?
I've had them, camping, and there's always a story. I just got, I had a fight with my girlfriend, so I had to spend the night out on the street, and it was, as you find out, they've been couch surfing and they've worn out their welcome, and
pre-homelessness, essentially. Yeah.
So, but you typically there's some other, you know, they've got some drugs on them or they've got some paraphernalia, so there's a connection. So if they're homeless because they're a drug addict or a drug abuser, then we can deal with that. You know, there are things that we can do. And we do things where for people may not be to the point where they need to go into drug court, but we can do some supervision. So we'll still do the drug testing and say, you know, you need to get a job. You know, I'm not going to put you in jail, but we need to do the drug testing.
What do you do on the short term? I show up to you camping without a permit, and you know, I don't know what do I usually get if I come to you camping without a permit?
Well, typically you don't come in.
Oh, okay.
Okay, you get a bench warrant because you don't show up.
Okay. Let's say I show up.
Okay. Where you show up is 3 weeks later when they go to write you another citation, put you in the computer, you got a bench warrant.
Gotcha.
So then you're in the Henderson jail and I see you on video. And so then there's a discussion about, you know, what's going on, where, you know, why are you, and then, you know, people don't want to admit, well, I'm just homeless. Well, some do, but mostly it's like, you know, well, I was just had a fight and, you know, we didn't have a place to go. And
what do you do about the ones that just say that? I'm homeless. You know, I don't have a place to go. I'm homeless.
What I typically say to them is, you're in the Henderson jail. You're going to get out of the Henderson jail. Then you need to go to St. Vincent Shelter.
Okay. And
so, well, where's that? I say, and then there's always an officer there, and I said, you can tell him where it is, right? And he said, yes. I said, okay, when they let you go, they're going to give you directions to St. Vincent's. And then, because often they'll say, well, I'm homeless because I don't have any identification anymore. I've lost it. So you can go to St. Vincent's and they will help you in the process.
So St. Vincent's is usually pretty good about helping with ID, because I know that is a large issue for homeless.
And if they're not able to do it, then they can get them to one of the shelters in Las Vegas who have social workers that can help them do that. But you know, part of it is that there are people who just want to be homeless.
Right.
And then, so then, you know, my response to that is, why were you in Boulder City? And kind of try and convince them that this is probably not a place they want to be homeless in. Yeah.
And is the thought process there just because we enforce those laws that other places may not enforce as much? Yeah.
So it's a you know, and I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
It's a serious problem. It's a concern. You know, probably the statistics show that a third of the people that are homeless are veterans and combat veterans. These are men and women who've, you know, put their life on the line for us, and yet they're not in a position to have a home. There is one of the ladies who worked for me part-time in the Justice Court. She worked while she's going to school at UNLV, and when she graduated, she got a job with American Vets, and they've got funding to put somebody in housing. If you're a veteran and you've been homeless for 24 hours, they'll get you a place to live.
Oh, okay.
And so I have.
And what organization did you say it was?
It's American Vets, I believe, or American Veterans. And their office is right downtown Las Vegas on Main Street and was it Forster? Not Forster. Anyways, down on Main Street where there's a lot of homeless people, and and she actually worked with us. We had one of our people in the drug court was a veteran, and they, because of the substance, he had a family, you know, and a wife and a child, and they got, so I got them hooked up. They got a home or an apartment here in Boulder City.
Oh, great.
And you know,
worked out.
Worked out. So.
Oh, very good. Now, you mentioned, at one part, you mentioned that there's video, that you have connections with Henderson. How long has that been going on, that you actually, I guess, almost hold court video sessions?
Yeah, those that are in custody, because originally we would transport them out. So
Right.
the police department had a van. They would go down and get them. And this was, back even in the days when the court was in City Hall, and which was stressful for the employees of City Hall, because we're hauling, 8, 10, or 12 people through there in chains.
Yeah.
And and then dealing with them, and then they'd have to be transported back, and so we set up a video link with the Henderson jail, and so twice a week through that I deal with the people that are in jail over there, and I'm trying to think when that's been more than 5 years.
Okay.
That we've been doing that, and is
that the city's idea? They decided that would be best, or
that was actually it was my idea.
Okay.
Because I saw the difficulty in the police department having to do that, because often they would have reserve officers do the transporting when they could, but if there was no reserve officer, we're taking somebody off from the street and having them, spend their shift driving people back and forth to Henderson. And so this has worked out real well, except right now we're dealing with an issue because Henderson has changed their program at the jail, their video, to a Cisco system, which I don't know what that means, but apparently that functions up here, and our system functions down here, and so there's some audio problems, so I have to keep asking to them repeat. So we're looking, the Henderson Justice Court is now using a program called Blue Jeans to do their video, because they do it there too, and which then will communicate with Cisco, and so we're trying to piggyback on somebody's license, because it's like $15,000 a year for this license, so we'd rather, and for $15,000 you get like 7 licenses.
Oh, okay.
So we don't need 7.
Right.
We only need 1. So we're talking.
We're hoping someone needs 6.
That's right. That's right. And so right now we're talking with the Las Vegas Justice Court, because they seem to have extra licenses. And
okay. Well, that's good, and so it saves officer time, saves your time, saves a lot of people's time. Very good.
Yeah.
So in your, it's now been 34-year career sitting on the bench here in Boulder City, what would you put, if you had to, as your toughest case?
Well, I had a murder case that happened. There were some young men from Coronado High School who brought a friend of theirs out here to Dry Lake and dug a hole and killed him and put him in the hole.
Oh boy.
And
it came to you because it was a dry lake.
Right. So it was in our jurisdiction, so our police department discovered the body. They did the CSI work, discovered who it was, which they tried to, they had watched these mobster movies.
Okay.
Like, I don't know, Scarface or
Godfather.
And so they, one of them who was like the ringleader said, "There's nothing can't be solved by a hole in the desert." And so they tried to obliterate things that you could identify a person from, and so, but our police department was able to locate who the victim was and his family, and then through. It's kind of depressing, so my voice is going down, so I apologize.
Yeah.
But so they located the suspects and then brought them to answer for the charges. There were 4 of them that were charged. Sad, case. Sad for the family that lost their son. Sad for the 4 families that lost their sons to the system. One of them was an Eagle Scout.
Oh, really?
Yeah. One of them was the little brother of the other one who begged to come along. He didn't know what he was coming along to.
Oh, really?
And but when he got there, he's the one who got the shotgun out of the trunk and he handed it, excuse me, to the shooter. So he
was accomplice.
He was accomplice. The testimony was that he then went and crawled in the backseat of the car and cried. So that, I think, probably would be the most difficult.
What did they end up getting?
It was pretty much they each got 20 years in Nevada State Prison.
Wow. I mean, that's got to be a real challenge, delineating out the instigator versus the accomplices, yet maybe unwilling accomplices, like maybe in his case. And is it really left, whose discretion is it to decide? Is that pretty much you as a judge who says, hey, you're just as much an accomplice? I mean, could you have chosen to give one more or one less?
Well, I didn't do the sentencing.
Okay.
As a justice of the peace, it's my job to determine if there's sufficient evidence to take the case to trial.
Oh, okay.
And so we do that through a preliminary hearing. And that preliminary hearing went on for several weeks, actually. And then as you know, you had to hear testimony from each one. Each one of them had an attorney. And at that point, they were each charged with capital murder, so they had to have, many of them had 2 attorneys, because you have to have an attorney that is certified in to represent individuals charged with capital crimes. So just having 6 attorneys, it takes a long time to everyone to introduce themselves. And then everyone has an opportunity to cross-examine the witnesses. So when the police officers would testify or the other witnesses would testify, you know, so it took some time to get through that. It was, you know, a difficult testimony to hear.
Yeah.
And so then they were sufficient evidence to go to trial, and then they went to trial in Las Vegas. Actually, they all reached a plea bargain before before trial. So there was no actual trial, but they all pled guilty and to murder with a definite sentence, usually 20 years.
Gotcha. So, and I'm putting you on the spot. So, can you think of a case? What is your I don't want to say funniest case, but maybe most interesting. We all read the police blotter once in a while, and there are some interesting things. I don't know how many of them actually get into your court, but is there any that you can think of off the top of your head that are just, I guess, unique?
It's, you know, it's never a dull moment up there. And every case that comes in there is important to the people that are involved.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if I had more time, I could think of some. But you know, it's just kind of the day in the life is interesting.
What are the common cases that you see in a day? I know probably none of them are common, but what is the makeup?
Well, in the justice court. So we do the felonies through the preliminary hearing.
Okay.
But we also
like that one.
And so the justice court includes not only Boulder City, but Nelson. In fact, it used to be called Nelson Township.
Oh, okay.
And the lower basin of Lake Mead. I just signed a warrant this past week for a rape that occurred at Sandy Cove.
Oh, okay.
So it's bigger geographically than just Boulder City. But so we do the felonies, but we also do civil cases. So any civil case in Nevada under $15,000 gets filed in a justice court. And that gets filed either by or against somebody from that township, so from Boulder City. So we hear those. We hear landlord-tenant cases. So that is, in fact, that's why Judge Segerblum said that he stopped being justice of the peace.
Oh, really?
Because he just tired of doing evictions.
Oh, okay.
So we do landlord-tenant, we do evictions, and we do protective orders against domestic violence,
Okay.
stalking, harassment, workplace violence.
Do you have a lot in Boulder City?
We do, actually. And that's one of the good things about having a judge that's full-time. As I mentioned, back 4 or 5 years ago, I became full-time. Having somebody full-time in the courthouse, a judge full-time in the courthouse, there's somebody comes in for a protective order, I'm there ready to review it, able to review it, and if they need protection, issue the order, which then can get over to the police department, get served, and the people get immediate protection.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I didn't, guess you don't think about the logistics that has to take place in a situation like that.
So in municipal court, it's just misdemeanors that happen in the town. So, and that's primarily would be driving while intoxicated, domestic violence, violation of protective orders, those kind of things, and traffic. And,
oh, right.
Yeah. The Interstate 11 is now opened. And we're averaging between the two courts about 100 citations a weekend.
Really?
Yeah, because we've had 4 deaths.
What was it before I-11?
Well, that's just from I-11.
Just from I-11.
Right.
So in addition
to what normally.
Wow, you said 100 on a weekend.
Yeah. So about 40 in municipal court and about 50 to 60 in justice court.
Now, what defines? I get a speeding ticket on I-11. Which court am I going to?
That's a good question. A lot of it depends upon who's the officer that cites you. Because if it's a Boulder City police officer, they're going to write into the Boulder City Municipal Court, and if it's a highway patrolman, they're going to write into the justice court.
Oh, okay.
What people, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't divulge this, but I've learned this within the last week. When they built the Interstate 11, they put what they call rolling scales in the road. So if you're a trucker, an 18-wheel trucker, they can measure your weight.
Your weight
where you're going on.
Oh, so if you're over the limit, they know.
They know.
Wow. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't have let that out. I don't know. Well, that's good. Maybe it'll keep people from doing it.
Yeah, maybe they'll just weigh their trucks before they leave.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I had no idea. Well, as you mentioned, how many times have you run for re-election?
This is the 5th time.
5th time, and the term is?
6 years.
6 years. So yeah, a lot of different terms. But this is the first time you're running when it is a full-time position.
Right.
Okay, so even if just by itself they'd consider that a full-time position, even though you would technically stay the municipal court, even if you were to lose in the election.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting.
But the way it's set up now, there's an agreement between the county and the city for me to be half-time both ways.
I see.
So, yeah.
So that would, and correct me if I'm wrong, so right now you're half-time both ways.
Right.
If you were to lose the election and that person became on full-time, would we go to a time-and-a-half judge?
No. No, it'd be 2 part-time judges.
It'd be 2 part-time judges?
Right.
Okay. That makes sense.
Just like it was when I was municipal judge
when you first came on.
When I first came on.
Yeah, and that was that way for, you said,
10 years.
10 years or so?
Yeah.
Oh, very interesting. So this is the first time you've run opposed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's probably different than your other ones for that reason.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So what would you say, what are the pros and cons to running an election opposed versus unopposed?
Well, unopposed, you have to get a vote.
And you always show up to vote.
And I always show up to vote. So, and my wife usually comes. So, actually, she always comes. So, you know, it's.
So you're very hopeful that it's at least 2, or else you have a talk afterwards.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, but it's interesting having an opposed race. Lots of knocking on doors, lots of meeting people. It's amazing the support that I'm getting in the community. People, you know, as we put out on Facebook yard signs for looking for a home, and within 2 weeks we've given away 300 signs. People just said, we need you, we want you. As I've talked to people, it's everyone has a court story.
Yeah, everyone's had to show up, if nothing else, for speeding or some
school
kind of traffic.
Zone or,
yeah.
And
of course, I would never do anything like that.
So you know, it's actually quite humbling for me to support in the community, because I love Boulder City. I've worked very hard to be a good judge. I have over 640 hours of judicial training. You know, so I get the training necessary to stay up to date. I've got the court. You know, when I started, we were in the city hall. I was instrumental in getting the courthouse built and designed, and then expanded so the Justice Court could be in the same building, and was able to use what we call facility funds through the state, so the taxpayers, they come from fines. So the taxpayers are not paying for the courthouse.
Okay.
In fact, the city benefits because I used those funds, built the Justice Court offices, which the city now rents to the county.
Oh, for the 50%.
For the offices for the county court, so the city's collecting rent money
for that building. Oh,
so
nice.
and then we're actually in the process. A contract's been let to put another little addition on it, so that there's a place for domestic violence people. Victims,
what do we do now?
So they can. Well, now we don't
just have one. Do we send them somewhere else?
For when they come to court, they
okay.
they have by statute a right to be separated from their the accused, and to have support from domestic violence counselors in a separate place. We don't have that, and now we're going to build that. Also, there has to be a place. The Supreme Court said, the Indigent Defense Commission of the Supreme Court said, there has to be a place for the accused to talk confidentially with their attorney. So they're not out in the courtroom trying to discuss plea bargains. And so we're giving a place for them as well. And also then the place for the city attorney to meet with the other attorneys so they can talk. So we're getting some little offices that will be added on, and a new entrance that will be more safe, more secure for the courthouse. So and that's again coming from facility fees. It's not coming from anything the taxpayers are paying. So.
Well, very good. Well, and I did want to ask you a couple things. One is, since this is the first time you're running that you are opposed, have you come up with a plan B? What happens if you're no longer the full-time judge in Boulder City? Would you go back to practice, or?
That's not going to happen.
You haven't had to worry about it.
Nope. There There is no plan B.
No plan B at this time.
We'll do fine.
Sounds good.
Boulder City needs to have a full-time judge. So there's always somebody in town, I think, in the building to take care of justice in Boulder City. And I think Boulder City understands that, and ultimately we'll just keep that.
Okay, very good. And I did want to ask you, and I'm not a lawyer or a judge, so if I ask something that you can't talk about because current cases, I think it's closed, and so I think you can discuss it. But there was a lot of hubbub about the pedestrian crossing case.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think, I don't want to comment on all the details because I'm sure I don't know them. But in the end, you chose to step back and bring in another judge from outside to rule in that case. Why did you decide to do that?
I can't talk about that. I really can't talk a lot about the case because it's still it's on appeal.
Oh, okay. So it was appealed.
It was appealed. So the individual was found guilty, and they are now appealing it. Also there was a companion civil case. The federal district judge in the civil case has decided dismissed the case.
Okay.
So that's on appeal as well. I understand. I haven't seen the appeal papers on that, or well, I wouldn't anyway. But that's what I read in the newspaper, that it had been dismissed. But the reason we have a duty as judges to sit. It's called the duty to sit. So to stay on cases if you can. Well, I issued a communication order. The case was getting out of hand on social media, and I wanted the case to be tried in the courtroom, not in social media. I wanted the attorneys to be nice to each other, to play nice. And so there was an order that the attorneys should not disparage one another on social media.
Okay.
Okay.
And has that changed recently? I mean, obviously social media is a fairly new thing, so I assume that's a new... Was it the same law? Did it used to be that you'd say don't disparage each other through letters to the editor, and now it's turned into social media?
Right. Okay. So and attorneys, attorneys are held to a different standard. You have to have professionalism. That's we consider ourselves professionals, mm-hmm. and have decorum to the court and to the other parties in the case, and that's really what I wanted the attorneys to do. Well, one of the attorneys felt like that violated his rights, and so he appealed that decision to the district judge in Las Vegas, and so and named me as a party on that appeal individually.
Okay.
So the city's insurance company then represented me in that proceeding. Those attorneys, without my knowing, filed a paper in the district court that had a version of the facts in the case.
Oh, okay.
And I had not heard the case. I had not had any, opinion as to what the facts were. But the fact that they were my attorney and they filed that paper.
So they filed it, which made it look like you had already had an opinion.
Right.
I see.
And so to avoid the appearance of impropriety.
Yeah, or pre-decision.
It was best for me just to back out of it and let another judge handle it. So that's what I did. So, interestingly, the district judge in Las Vegas agreed that attorneys are at a different standard, and that the court should avoid a circus atmosphere or carnival atmosphere, I think is what she said. But she couldn't understand how a simple crosswalk case in Boulder City could lead to a circus. So then she said, so we didn't need the protective order or the communications order, and did away with it. But it's a judge on the other side of the mountain probably didn't understand the way things work
can happen in a small town.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for sitting down and discussing with me. I really enjoyed learning about our court a little bit and about your past and a little bit about the history here in Boulder City. So.
Well, if I can say, there's kind of one other thing that someone mentioned today. They said, well, term limits. They mentioned term limits.
Oh, okay.
And for judges, there are no term limits.
Mm-hmm. Because they passed a law in Nevada that all, I don't know how it's worded, but they're all 12 years, isn't it?
Right.
And so, but there is an exemption for judges, you're saying?
Right. They were never included in that because the committee who put together the referendum for the term limits looked and realized that there's a difference between a legislature, a governor, a city council person, and a judge, because we're not making laws, we're interpreting laws. So we don't have pressures from lobbyists or special interest group to make law in a particular way.
Gotcha.
And then and our founding fathers knew this. The
Supreme Court is a lifetime appointment.
Lifetime appointment. Federal judges in Las Vegas are a lifetime appointment.
Oh, okay.
So it's but they realized that as a judge, the longer you sit on a judge, the literally more wisdom you get, because you've heard the story before.
Yeah. More cases, more experience.
More experience, and you get a sense of when someone's telling you the truth and when they're trying to fudge on the truth, and so that comes with experience on the bench and training. I mentioned I had the Supreme Court has acknowledged and given me an award for this called the Distinguished Education Award in
oh, really?
The judicial. What was it? The Judicial Distinguished Education Award.
And it comes through the Supreme Court?
Yeah, the Nevada Supreme Court.
Nevada Supreme Court?
Yeah.
Wow. Very nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me and let me, bore you with history and.
No, I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.